magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
The most explosive part of the story is not what Prince William publicly revealed. It is what the internet insists he revealed, that Queen Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopez, secretly moved against Diana's legacy, and that King Charles demanded answers. But behind that headline sits a contradiction powerful enough to change the entire story. There is no verified palace statement accusing Laura Lopez of such a plot. There is no credible report of William exposing her, no confirmed high court raid over Diana's jewelry, and no public evidence that Charles confronted anyone about it. The competitor account describes frozen accounts, officers at a Wiltshire estate, secret constitutional documents, and missing artifacts. Those extraordinary details appear without independently verifiable reporting. So why does the accusation still feel believable to so many royal watchers? Laura Lopez is not a working royal. She is Camilla's daughter from her first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, an art curator who has generally lived outside the daily machinery of monarchy. Her daughter Eliza served as a bridesmaid at William and Catherine's wedding, while Laura's twin sons later served as pages at Camilla's coronation. Those are visible family connections, not evidence of a hidden campaign. Yet Laura remains close enough to the crown to attract suspicion and private enough for speculation to fill the silence. And Diana's legacy is not an ordinary subject inside this family. It is emotional, historical, and politically sensitive. Diana, Princess of Wales, remains one of the most powerful figures in modern royal memory because her public warmth and humanitarian work changed expectations of monarchy. For Prince William, that legacy is not an abstract chapter in royal history. It is the memory of his mother, permanently tied to the future king he is expected to become. William's documented actions reinforce that connection. He and Prince Harry commissioned the statue of Diana unveiled in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace in 2021. The memorial was intended to recognize her impact and help future generations understand her historical significance. William has also continued work connected to causes associated with his mother, particularly homelessness. These public choices reveal something more convincing than any secret legal drama. He has placed Diana's values inside his own public identity. But the rumor exposes a deeper fault line. Whenever Queen Camilla's family moves closer to royal ceremony, some viewers interpret that visibility as competition with Diana's memory. Laura's children participating in the coronation had an obvious family explanation. Yet symbolically, it placed Camilla's descendants inside one of the monarchy's most historic rituals. To supporters, it represented a blended family. To critics, it looked like permanence, the confirmation that Camilla's family now occupied space emotionally associated with Diana and her sons. That interpretation may be unfair, but it cannot simply be dismissed. Royal legitimacy is built not only through law and titles, but through images. A balcony appearance, a coronation robe, a place in a procession, or a child carrying part of a queen's train can communicate belonging more powerfully than an official biography. The monarchy understands symbolism better than almost any institution. And because Diana's absence remains emotionally present, every new symbol connected to Camilla is measured against the woman who is not there. This is where the allegation against Laura becomes revealing, even without evidence. It turns a quiet, private daughter into the face of a larger public anxiety, the fear that Diana's place in royal history could be softened, absorbed, or gradually replaced. There is no proof Laura attempted any such thing, but the rumor gives that fear a name. It reduces a decades-long struggle over memory to a confrontation the audience immediately understands. William protecting his mother, Camilla protecting her family, and Charles caught between the past that shaped his reign and the marriage defining his present life. Yet the simplest version remains incomplete. King Charles has participated in institutional memorials to Diana's life, and the royal family's historical material still recognizes her charitable legacy and her role as William and Harry's mother. Camilla's position as queen does not legally erase Diana's history, and Laura has no official constitutional role through which she could rewrite it. The dramatic claim collapses against the public record, but the emotional conflict underneath it remains real. Charles's problem is larger than whether one viral allegation is true. As king, husband, and father, he presides over a family whose private history became national memory. Any perception that Camilla's household is advancing at Diana's expense risks reopening wounds the palace spent decades trying to contain. Any forceful defense of Diana can be interpreted as criticism of the Queen. Silence protects the institution temporarily, but it also creates the empty space in which stories like this grow. And William occupies the most sensitive position of all. He does not need to accuse Laura Lopez publicly to make his priorities clear. The statue at Kensington Palace, the causes he champions, and the language he uses about his mother already establish the boundary. Diana's legacy will remain part of the identity of the future reign. The unanswered question is not whether Laura launched a secret plot. It is who benefits when Camilla's private daughter is portrayed as the woman trying to erase Diana, and why that allegation arrived in a form so detailed that fiction began to resemble evidence. Because once the supposed raid, frozen accounts, and invented legal machinery are stripped away, another trail remains: the real history of Diana's possessions, the rules governing royal jewelry, and the suspicion surrounding every piece later worn by another royal woman. That is where the rumor found its power, and where the next part of the story becomes far more difficult for the palace to control. That trail does not begin with Laura Lopez. It begins with ownership, because royal jewelry is not one collection controlled by whoever lives inside the palace. Some objects belong to the royal collection and are held in trust by the sovereign for future monarchs and the nation. Others are private possessions that can pass through an estate. Diana's personal jewelry belonged to that second world, and her stated wish was that it should be held for her sons, so their wives could one day use it. That distinction immediately weakens the most dramatic allegation. There is no verified evidence that Laura ever controlled Diana's jewelry, attempted to sell it, or possessed authority to remove it from William's family. She is Camilla's daughter, but she is not a working royal, holds no constitutional office, and has no publicly documented role in managing either the royal collection or Diana's estate. The story places her close to the crown, then quietly gives her powers she has never been shown to possess. That is the first major shift. The supposed plot looks less like a documented operation and more like a symbolic accusation. Yet symbolism is precisely where the allegation becomes difficult for Buckingham Palace. Diana's sapphire engagement ring is now worn by Catherine, Princess of Wales, after William used it when he proposed. Its meaning is unmistakable. A private object once associated with a broken royal marriage has become part of the public image of the future king and queen. William described the gesture as a way of keeping his mother close to an important moment in his life. No secret decree was required. One visible ring carried the message. But another image complicated the emotional landscape. At the 2023 coronation, Laura's twin sons, Gus and Louis Lopez, serve as pages of honor for their grandmother. Their ceremonial uniforms placed Camilla's family inside Westminster Abbey at the moment she was crowned. Laura attended, and her older daughter, Eliza, had already appeared as a bridesmaid at William and Catherine's wedding in 2011. These are not signs of a covert war. They show years of public family inclusion. But to viewers who continue to see Diana and Camilla as permanent rivals, the coronation presented a more uncomfortable picture. Camilla's descendants were no longer standing at the edge of royal history. They were carrying part of it. That does not prove an attempt to erase Diana. It explains why the rumor found an audience. Camilla's family can enter royal ceremony through personal relationships, while Diana's legacy enters through William, Harry, Catherine, and the public memory surrounding them. The two forms of influence are different, but they occupy the same visual space. Every appearance becomes a comparison, and every comparison revives a conflict the institution would prefer to describe as settled. The balance of power, however, is not equal. Laura can attend ceremonies and support her mother, but William possesses something more consequential, the authority of succession. The statue of Diana, in Kensington Palace's sunken garden, was commissioned by her sons to recognize her impact and help future generations understand her historical importance. William has also connected his work on homelessness to experiences Diana introduced to him as a child. More recently, he brought Prince George to the Passage, where father and son served Christmas lunch at the shelter William first visited with Diana. George signed the same guestbook page carrying names from that earlier visit. That is not nostalgia alone. It is legacy being transferred into another generation. And this is where the title's promise changes shape. William has not publicly revealed a secret plot by Camilla's daughter. What he has revealed, through years of visible choices, is that Diana's memory will remain embedded in the future monarchy. It appears in Catherine's ring, in a statue at Kensington Palace, in William's charitable priorities, and now in the education of Prince George. Anyone attempting to diminish that legacy would not merely be challenging a memory. They would be challenging part of the identity William is building around his eventual reign. Where does that leave King Charles? There is no confirmed public account of him demanding answers from Laura, and presenting such a confrontation as fact would repeat the problem at the center of the rumor. But the allegation still creates pressure around him. Charles is both the monarch who crowned Camilla as queen and the father of the two men who inherited Diana's personal legacy. He cannot publicly treat every comparison as a family dispute because Diana's place in modern royal history extends far beyond the family. At the same time, he cannot allow unproven accusations against Camilla's daughter to circulate as though the palace had confirmed them. One interpretation is straightforward. Laura's name was selected because she is private, recognizable, and close enough to Camilla to make an invented plot feel plausible. A more strategic interpretation is that the accusation is not truly aimed at Laura. It is a warning directed at Camilla that public acceptance of her queenship does not include permission to redefine Diana's place in the story. The evidence strongly supports the first explanation as fact. The second explains the emotion driving the reaction. That emotion is powerful because the monarchy has never fully controlled Diana's legacy. Her image belongs partly to her sons, partly to the institution she once represented, and partly to a public that formed its own relationship with her. The palace can organize memorials and preserve objects, but it cannot dictate what millions remember when they see Camilla's family beside the crown. And once that becomes clear, the deeper conflict is no longer about a daughter, a jewel, or a supposed secret order. It is about the decades-long battle to define Diana after her death, and the role Charles, Camilla, and William each played in creating the conditions for that battle. Because the allegation may be new, but the wounded exploits began long before Laura Lopez entered the headline. That wound began in 1995, when Diana sat inside Kensington Palace and gave the panorama interview that would define the final years of her public life. A quarter of a century later, an independent inquiry concluded that Martin Bashir had used deception and false documents to secure access to her. Prince William's response was unusually direct. The false claims had played on his mother's fears, worsened his parents' relationship, and helped create a narrative commercialized for decades. That history changes the meaning of the allegations surrounding Laura Lopez. The viral story presents William as the man finally exposing a secret campaign against Diana, yet it builds that supposed revelation from unverified raids, invented legal machinery, and private confrontations for which no verifiable sources are provided. The contradiction is difficult to ignore. A narrative claiming to defend Diana's memory is using the same weapon William condemned. Emotionally persuasive detail arranged around a story the audience is encouraged to accept before the evidence is tested. William's real response to that danger has never depended on secret warrants. It has been visible and institutional. The statue he and Harry commissioned for the sunken garden was unveiled on what would have been Diana's 60th birthday. It was intended not merely as a family memorial, but to help future generations understand her place in history. The bronze figure stands beside 3 children, turning the image of Diana away from scandal and toward the humanitarian identity her sons wanted preserved. The second connection is even more revealing. William did not preserve Diana only through stone and ceremony. He converted one of her lessons into part of his public program. He first visited the passage with his mother as a child in 1993, and later said the experience left a deep and lasting impression. He eventually became the charity's royal patron, while his Homewards initiative placed homelessness near the center of his work as Prince of Wales. That is how legacy becomes power inside a monarchy, through the authority to decide which values move into the next reign. Laura has no comparable instrument. Her connection to the crown is personal, through her mother, while William's is constitutional and generational. Camilla's children may appear at family ceremonies, but they do not control the future direction of the institution. William can attach Diana's name to public service, place her image within Kensington Palace, and carry her influence into his own household. The supposed battle, therefore, looks different when stripped of its fictional machinery. The decisive power already sits with the future king. But another contradiction was forming. The more openly William secured his mother's legacy, the more online stories portrayed him as a silent avenger operating behind palace walls. His documented actions were public, yet the most dramatic narratives replaced them with secret folders, frozen accounts, and royal orders. Why? Because institutional remembrance is slow, while revenge is immediate. A statue explains continuity. A raid promises punishment. One protects history, the other generates suspense. Charles stands inside that contradiction. The royal family's own account of Diana continues to recognize her charitable work, including her advocacy for homeless people, children, disabled people, and those living with HIV and AIDS. Her place has not been officially erased. At the same time, Camilla's queenship confirms that the monarchy has moved forward with a different woman beside the king. Both realities are visible, but emotionally they remain difficult for part of the public to hold together. Seen separately, William's memorial projects and the reuse of historic royal jewelry can be explained through ordinary institutional practice. Seen together through the old emotional wound, they are easily rearranged into a theory of replacement. That does not prove coordination. It reveals a pattern. A genuine ceremonial detail is detached from its legal or historical context, linked to Diana's suffering, and presented as evidence of an intention nobody has demonstrated. The most revealing example was not hidden in a court file. It was worn in public. A historic Prince of Wales feathers brooch had been used by Diana as a pendant, later worn by Camilla, and eventually passed to Catherine after she became Princess of Wales. The object did not move like privately stolen property. It followed the royal title with which it had long been associated. Yet photographs of the same jewel on different women created an emotional sequence more powerful than its documented provenance. That single piece exposes the mechanism behind the allegation. To one viewer, it represents continuity across generations of princesses of Wales. To another, Camilla wearing something associated with Diana looks like appropriation. And when Laura's name is added to that image, an inherited symbol can be transformed into evidence of a family plot without any new fact being introduced. The palace could dismiss the allegation, but that would not solve the deeper problem. The jewelry has a traceable history. The emotion attached to it does not obey ownership records. And one transition, from Diana to Camilla, and finally to Catherine, was about to show why William's position had become stronger than the rumor suggested, and why the future of Diana's legacy would be decided not by Charles's wife or her daughter, but by the woman standing beside the next king. That woman was Catherine, and the turning point arrived on September 9, 2022, when King Charles III publicly named William and Catherine the new Prince and Princess of Wales. The announcement did more than transfer two titles. It placed Catherine inside the role most closely associated in modern memory with Diana, while making William the immediate heir. In one sentence, the debate over who could shape Diana's legacy moved away from Camilla's private family and into the future household of the crown. Kensington Palace responded carefully. Catherine, it said, understood the history attached to the title, but intended to create her own path within it. That wording mattered. It acknowledged Diana without suggesting imitation, and it protected Catherine from becoming a replacement version of the woman whose sapphire engagement ring she already wore. But the comparison gave William something no secret confrontation could have produced: a public, constitutional structure through which his mother's influence could continue. The immediate consequence was a shift in leverage. Camilla was now queen. Yet Catherine had become the woman expected to stand beside the next monarch. One represented the present reign. The other represented what followed. Laura Lopez remained a private citizen without official authority over either direction. The allegation that she possessed the power to remove Diana from royal history became harder to sustain once the line of succession itself had placed Diana's son and daughter-in-law at the center of the monarchy's future. Then the jewelry began to carry a different meaning. Catherine's engagement ring was Diana's personal possession, given by William as part of their marriage story. Other pieces associated with Diana, however, came from the wider royal collection and followed institutional rules rather than private inheritance. The Cambridge Lovers' Not tiara is a clear example. Queen Mary commissioned it long before Diana entered royal life. Queen Elizabeth II later loaned it to Diana, and Catherine has worn it repeatedly as Princess of Wales. The object did not belong to one woman's private legacy. But every time Catherine appeared in it, the public saw continuity between them. That distinction changed the story. A private jewel could pass through Diana's estate. A royal jewel could return to the collection and later be worn by another senior woman. And a title could transfer through constitutional succession. The viral allegation blurred all three categories, turning inheritance, institutional ownership, and public symbolism into one imagined plot. Once separated, the supposed conspiracy weakened. Yet the emotional pressure increased, because the official rules still produced images that looked personal. Charles therefore faced a consequence no denial could remove. By naming Catherine Princess of Wales, he strengthened the future monarchy and honored the structure of succession. At the same time, he restored a title that many people had not emotionally separated from Diana. Camilla had deliberately used Duchess of Cornwall rather than Princess of Wales after marrying Charles, partly because the association remained so sensitive. Catherine could not avoid that history. Her appointment brought it back into the center of royal life with the king's own approval. The pressure was no longer coming from a rumor alone. It came from the monarchy's visible architecture. William carried Diana's memory as her son. Catherine carried the title once connected to her. Camilla carried the reality of the marriage that followed. Charles carried responsibility for holding those histories together without allowing one to destroy the legitimacy of another. Laura, despite appearing in the headline, controlled none of those forces. This was the real power shift. Before the title change, Diana's legacy could still be discussed primarily as memory, a statue, a charity visit, a ring, an anniversary. After Catherine became Princess of Wales, that legacy became connected to succession. It was no longer only about how Diana would be remembered. It was about how the next reign would present itself. William could protect that connection simply by continuing his public work, raising his children within it, and allowing Catherine to define the role in a way that acknowledged history without being trapped by it. But the shift created risks of its own. One possible outcome was careful coexistence. Camilla could fulfill her duties as queen. Catherine could shape a distinct identity as Princess of Wales, and Diana's humanitarian influence could remain visible through William's work. That arrangement required discipline, restraint, and a refusal to treat every jewel or ceremony as evidence of rivalry. The second outcome was more damaging. Every appearance involving Camilla's family could be interpreted as encroachment, while every Diana-linked symbol worn by Catherine could be presented as a deliberate rebuke. In that version, even ordinary royal continuity would become evidence in an endless emotional trial. The palace might control titles, access, and official statements, but it could not control how millions of viewers connected the images. And that made the allegation against Laura useful to people far beyond Laura herself. It transformed a complicated institutional transition into a simple conflict with heroes and villains. William became the defender. Diana became the threatened legacy. Camilla's daughter became the hidden aggressor. Charles became the monarch supposedly forced to choose. The story was false in its most dramatic details, but its structure echoed a genuine pressure inside the crown. The future monarchy cannot be built without deciding how the past will be carried forward. The turning point, therefore, did not expose a secret plot. It exposed the limits of royal control. Charles could grant the title. William and Catherine could shape its future. Camilla could perform her role with discipline. Yet none of them could fully command the emotional meaning attached to Diana's name. And that leaves the final question. If Laura never possessed the authority to erase Diana, why was she placed at the center of the accusation at all? The answer may reveal less about what Camilla's daughter did and far more about what the public still fears the monarchy might do once William finally inherits it. Laura Lopez was placed at the center because she made an invisible fear visible. She was close enough to Queen Camilla to seem connected to royal power, private enough for the public to know little about her, and distant enough from official duties that silence could be mistaken for secrecy. The accusation did not require evidence to feel persuasive. It only required an audience already worried that Diana's memory might be softened as the monarchy moved deeper into Charles and Camilla's reign. That is the first lasting consequence. The story showed that Diana's legacy is no longer protected only by photographs, anniversaries, or private inheritance. It is protected by public expectation. Any senior royal who appears to diminish or place risks being judged not simply for a family decision, but for challenging a memory millions believe belongs partly to them. The palace can correct a title, clarify ownership, or reject an allegation. It cannot order the public to feel differently. The second consequence is a clearer balance of power. Camilla holds the rank of queen, but William controls the future direction of the crown he will inherit. Catherine now carries the title of Princess of Wales, while their children represent the next generation of succession. Laura has family proximity, not institutional authority. That distinction is decisive. The dramatic version: imagine William fighting to recover power from Camilla's daughter. The public record points in the opposite direction. The future king already possesses the stronger platform from which Diana's memory can be preserved. But that advantage carries a cost. William cannot invoke his mother's legacy only when it is emotionally convenient. Every time he connects Diana to homelessness, public service, compassion, or the upbringing of Prince George, he creates an expectation for his future reign. People will measure his leadership against the values they associate with her. Protecting the memory, therefore, becomes more than an act of loyalty. It becomes a standard against which his authority may eventually be tested. Charles faces a different long-term pressure. His reign must recognize Diana's historical importance without allowing the monarchy to remain permanently trapped inside the breakdown of their marriage. Supporters may see his approach as mature continuity: honor the past, recognize Camilla's service, and allow William and Catherine to build the future. Critics may see a palace willing to celebrate Diana's charitable image while avoiding the institutional failures that helped shape her isolation. The private motive cannot be known. The emerging legacy question is whether Charles balanced those histories or merely postponed the reckoning. That is why the invented demand for answers felt satisfying. It offered a clean resolution the real monarchy cannot provide. Charles confronts the supposed offender. William defends his mother. The plot is exposed. Order is restored. But the genuine conflict has no single culprit and no document capable of ending it. It involves memory, succession, public trust, and the emotional meaning attached to royal symbols. Those forces cannot be settled by one family conversation. The strongest interpretation is therefore not that Laura attempted to erase Diana, nor that William uncovered a secret campaign. There is no verified evidence supporting either claim. The more convincing explanation is that Laura became a proxy in a struggle over who has the right to define Diana now. Her name gave the rumor a human target, while the title connected that target to Camilla. Once that structure was in place, every coronation image, jewelry appearance, and palace silence could be rearranged to support the allegation. What changed was not Laura's influence. What changed was the visibility of the public boundary around Diana. The reaction demonstrated that any perceived encroachment will be resisted, whether the evidence is strong, weak, or absent. That creates an informal palace precedent. Camilla's relatives may be included as family, but the institution must avoid presenting that inclusion as an alternative royal dynasty. The line is not constitutional. It is reputational, and that can make it just as difficult to cross. Catherine's role becomes more important within that arrangement. She can acknowledge Diana without imitating her, represent continuity without reopening every conflict, and give William's future household a stabilizing image separate from both Charles and Camilla. Yet even this position is fragile. A brooch, a title, or a carefully staged photograph can be interpreted in opposite ways depending on what the viewer already believes. The palace controls the object and the occasion. The audience controls the meaning. The next royal test may come at a major state occasion where the king and queen appear alongside the prince and princess of Wales. Royal observers will watch the formal order, the jewelry, the language used in official coverage, and the placement of extended family members. None of those details would prove a private conflict. But after stories like this, even routine ceremony will be examined for evidence of which legacy the monarchy is elevating and which influence is moving closer to the center. One uncertainty remains. William's public commitment to Diana is clear, but how it will shape his decisions as king cannot yet be known. He may preserve the balance Charles established, separating Camilla's family from constitutional life while treating them with personal respect. Or he may draw firmer boundaries around access, ceremony, and the public use of royal association. The decision belongs to a future reign, but the expectation is being created now. And that expectation reaches beyond Diana. It raises a larger question about every person who stands near the crown without formally serving it. How much influence should family proximity create, and when does private connection become a public liability? That same tension is already present elsewhere in the House of Windsor, where titles, access, loyalty, and reputation continue to collide. The accusation against Laura may be settling into royal fiction, but the institutional fear beneath it is moving directly toward another family relationship the palace has never fully managed.
You get the atmosphere. I mean, I did find it harrowing. I mean,
Did you find it harrowing?
I did.
A black car at Clarence House, a locked case in the boot, pages said to be written in Diana's own hand. The claim is that Prince William ordered the car opened and discovered a secret Camilla's son could not explain. But one detail immediately changes the story. None of it has been publicly verified. The account names guards, private rooms, exact conversations, archival codes, and even a senior palace official, presenting each detail with the confidence of a court record. Yet the story supplies no police report, no palace statement, no court filing, and no identifiable publication supporting the alleged discovery. It even refers to Sir Clive Alden as the king's principal private secretary, while official royal records identify that official as Sir Clive Alderton. The difference is only a few letters, but in a story built on supposed inside knowledge, those letters matter. That does not mean the emotional conflict is invented. Tom Parker Bowles is Queen Camilla's son from her first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles. He is a food writer and author, not a working member of the royal family, and his public life has generally been built around restaurants, books, and broadcasting rather than palace authority. In June 2026, he and his sister Laura Lopez appeared in the royal box at Ascot, close enough to the monarchy to attract attention, but still outside the official working family. That unusual position makes him a perfect character for a royal mystery, connected, recognizable, and largely beyond public scrutiny. But the car is where the story becomes dangerously effective. Diana died after a car crash in Paris in 1997, and the mythology surrounding her death has never entirely disappeared. Place her private handwriting inside another car, connect that car to Camilla's son, and the objects acquire a meaning before anyone asks whether they existed. The vehicle is no longer transportation. It becomes a symbol linking Diana's fear, Camilla's family, and William's unresolved responsibility as her eldest son. Then comes the second layer. Private words belonging to Diana have caused real royal crises before. Recorded interviews helped Andrew Morton produce his 1992 biography. A handwritten note later released by former butler Paul Burrell described Diana's fear of a planned car accident. Those materials were not discovered in Tom Parker Bowles' boot, but their existence makes a fictional case of diaries and letters sound familiar enough to pass as history. The most successful fabrication is rarely built from nothing. It borrows the emotional shape of something the audience already remembers. And William has publicly explained why that matters to him. After Lord Dyson's investigation into Martin Bashir's 1995 Panorama interview, William said false claims and deceptive documents had played on Diana's fears, worsened his parents' relationship, and helped establish a narrative commercialized for more than 25 years. His words were controlled, but the message was severe. Exploiting his mother through manufactured evidence was not merely bad journalism. It had consequences inside his family. That statement creates the first genuine conflict beneath the headline. If William encountered supposedly explosive material connected to Diana, his most documented instinct would not be to stage a 10-minute courtyard confrontation. It would be to question the source, the chain of custody, and the motive of the person presenting it. A diary can be authentic while the story attached to its